Good evening and welcome to the January meeting of the Newham Pensions Board. Due to the COVID-19 related restrictions, this meeting is going to be held via Zoom and is live streamed on YouTube. Firstly, please confirm that you all can hear me by raising your hands. Okay, thank you. Now, please mute your microphones until invited to speak. And if anyone has any question or you want to get my attention, please raise your hands and then I can ask you to talk. My name is Tejonidhi Kashyap and I'm the chair of the Newham Pensions Board. I will now ask members and officers attending to introduce themselves and announce their title. So I'll go alphabetically. Donford.
Donford Warden, Branch Secretary of Unite.
John Hollands. John, you're on mute.
Hello, I'm John Hollands. I'm an employer representative.
John Saunders.
Hello, I'm John Saunders and I'm also an employer representative.
Veronica.
Hello, I'm Veronica Holly and I'm from Unison.
Now the officers, Rakesh.
Yeah, my name is Rakesh Rajan. I manage the Newham Pension Fund.
And James.
Hi there, James Cox. I'm Head of People Transactional Services.
Thank you. Thanks all. We also have a guest. We'll introduce her later in the agenda. So now we'll go to the next item on the agenda. Any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. We've had one apology for absence from Catherine Hanlon, the GMB rep.
Okay, thank you. We also have Pauline, who's a clerk, who's taking notes, and a staff, Antonella, who's helping us with the technical side of things on Zoom and YouTube. So thanks for attending. Let's go to the next item, declarations of interest. Are there any members who wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or a personal interest that you may have in any matter related to the meeting?
Donford Warden, member of the pension scheme.
Donford, I couldn't quite get that.
Member of the pension scheme.
Okay, thank you. I think we've noted this earlier. I think being a member of the pension scheme is fine. I don't think it's a conflict.
No, it's not. It's fine.
Thank you. Thanks for that anyway. The next item, item 4. So in the previous meeting, and I guess the one before that, we've had questions about governance based on the audit report from the local pensions partnership authority administration. And we have some risk and compliance officer from the administration to answer that. So before we get to that, James, do you want to introduce us to Janet and take us through the agenda?
Yes, so I've invited Janet to attend. Just first one is just to go through, there's a number of concerns raised by board just on the findings of the internal governance report that LPP carried out in early 2020, late 2019. And Janet's going to take us through a presentation just about the changes that they've made subsequently in relation to controls and governance within LPPA, and then just to take a couple of questions just in relation to specific points board members made. So I'll let Janet take over and share her screen and run through the presentation.
Thanks, James. Over to you, Janet.
Thank you very much. So I'm Janet Morville-Smith. I'm the head of risk and compliance for Local Pensions Partnership Administration Limited. And if I can just share my screen with you. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, lovely. So what I wanted to do today really was to just talk you through very briefly the changes that have happened in LPPA over the last few months, and what the risk and compliance function within LPPA looks like today. And then look at how that function is driving business improvements throughout the pension administration area of the business, and the changes that we're starting to embrace within the business. So, as many of you will probably know, LPP was a group function that looks after the funding and the investments of the pension schemes and also the pensions administration. And towards the end of 2019 to 2020, a decision was made that the company was going to restructure. And that restructure was going to create two independent entities. So there would be the investment entity and the pension administration entity. And that restructure happened in June last year. So the Local Pensions Partnership Administration Limited was created in its own right as a separate entity from June 2020. And it was for that purpose that I was brought into the business, to build a dedicated risk and compliance function for the pensions administration business. Prior to that, Local Pensions Partnership, the group, had group compliance and group risk functions within that business, but they were very heavily focused on the regulatory part of the business, which was the assets and the investments. And it was, it was quite clear that really the administration part of the business was being not neglected, but it wasn't given the focus that it really deserved and needed to provide the assurance to the clients, that what we do within the pension administration part of the business complies with all of the regulations that are needed to be adhered to, and also that the functions themselves and the processes that are followed on your behalf are being done to a high standard. So I was brought in, as I said, to build a dedicated risk and compliance function within the pension administration business. And that is now fully created, that is now in place. And I have 10 people that report into me across that function. And it covers various, jumped ahead. It covers various aspects of governance, compliance and risk. And I've brought together really all of the aspects of pension administration that should be independent of the operational areas of the business. So they have to have that independence so that they can look at things in a constructive manner and an objective manner, and not be biased by the fact that they are potentially reporting through the operational management lines. So they are completely autonomous and separate from the administration part of the business, and they all report directly into me. So in that function that I've built, I've got the governance and risk part of the team, and they look after the policies, they look after the risk framework, manage the breach registers and any incidents, and they make sure that the wider regulatory requirements such as GDPR, data protection, anti-money laundering, the banking code, all of those weird and wonderful regulations that apply to pensions administration are being adhered to, and that we are keeping abreast of any changes in those regulations. Then I have the technical team. The technical team are really the pension regulation experts. So they are responsible for the actual pension regulations. So the LGPS regulations, the Pension Schemes Act, all of the various legislation that drives how pensions should be operated and managed. Then I have a team that are responsible for quality and compliance monitoring. And they go out into the business and make sure that the regulations that the governance and risk team and the technical team are driving into the business are actually being dealt with properly, and they are built into the procedures so that everybody, they don't have to be a technical expert and they don't have to fully understand the regulations, but as long as the procedures are written in such a way that they comply with the relevant regulations, we will be adhering to those regulations when we do the casework and when we do the actual administration of the pensions. And the final team that reports into me, again, who need to be independent and have that autonomy to look, step back and take a wider look at complaints that happen, and the anything that comes through as an appeal through the IDRP process. So really what my team do is it's twofold. So they manage the regulatory aspect of the work that is coming through. So they look at the regulations, they make sure that the policy framework adheres to those regulations, and the risk management framework is managing the risk of not complying with various regulations. And then the other aspect of my team is to drive continuous improvement. So what the compliance monitoring and the quality team are doing is they are really there to give yourselves as our clients the assurances that you've not previously been receiving, but going forward that assurance will be being delivered to you on a regular basis, where they will actually be doing the quality assurance work is more of a checking process. So they're checking that the work that's being done is being done correctly, and that it's following the correct procedures, and that people have the knowledge and the skill sets to do the work that they are employed to do. The monitoring and the auditing side of that team is where they do much more of a deep dive into a particular process. So if we start to see breaches in a certain area, or we start to see complaints materializing about a certain process, then the monitoring team will go in and do a deep dive to find out exactly what is happening and what's potentially going wrong. And then the complaints team are obviously looking after the member satisfaction, so dealing with complaints, resolving those complaints for the member, so that the member is satisfied with the resolution to their complaint. And both of those teams, the monitoring team and the complaints team, really drive both process improvements and business improvements. I always say the best feedback you can get from anybody is a complaint, because until somebody tells you that something has gone wrong, you don't know that it's going wrong. And that's how we learn from our mistakes, and we make sure that we correct it and we don't, make that same mistake again. So the way that we drive those improvements through the business and the processes that we operate in is our regulatory teams do horizon scanning to keep up to date with changes in regulations or anything new that's coming down the line. We keep up, we regularly review the policies that we have. We have a regular policy review process to make sure that they are fit for purpose and that they remain fit for purpose. So as things change, the policies are adapted with those changes and keep abreast with them. The risk management framework, we have our risk register, and we monitor that risk register on a regular basis, and we test the controls for each of those risks. So what we say, is the process or the policy or whatever it is that is there to control a particular risk. We will test those controls to make sure that they continue to control that risk and that nothing has changed. We give advice with a small a, not regulated or financial advice, but we do give advice and guidance to employers and to members and to our clients. And we run quite a few events through our engagement team that people are invited to attend on certain aspects of pension administration, or some things that employers have said to us that they are struggling with, perhaps that they don't quite understand what is expected of them in a particular subject matter, and we will do some training with them, and we will put some guidance notes together to help them to understand and to help them to help us to administer the pensions, in a much more streamlined manner. We've also, since I came on board, introduced a documentation sign-off process. So every piece of documentation now that is in LPPA, be that customer correspondence or the content on the website, or this training and guidance that I've just mentioned, anything that is externally facing has to go through a rigorous sign-off process to make sure that A, it's accurate, and B, it's fit for purpose. And by that I mean that it's written and it's formatted and delivered in a way that the intended audience can understand. So depending on who the material is aimed at, it's written in a way that it's not jargon, it's not pension speak, it's more plain English, that they can understand what it's actually trying to tell them, and they can then get a better understanding of their own pension. If it's aimed at the members, they can actually understand the pension world a little bit more and understand what the pension benefits are for them, and what is being delivered for them, and the benefits that they're getting from their employment by being a member of this pension scheme. And of course we keep on top of regulatory change. So everybody is aware at the moment, exit cap is a hot topic. McLeod is one of those things that's rumbling. We have started, since I joined the business now, to respond to the consultations that are coming out of the government bodies. So we are formally responding to their consultations. We're taking part in that consultation process. And we're doing that in collaboration with the clients. So we've held roundtable sessions, although it wasn't actually round a table, it was a virtual meeting as we're doing today. But we've held sessions with various representatives of all of the clients that we work with to get their input to those responses, and to make sure that if there is something that's being consulted on by government or whoever is driving the change, if we feel really, really strongly about any of their proposals or their consultation, we can at least then all push in the same direction and try to influence what comes out of those consultations. And then, of course, on the continuous improvement side, we're checking the quality of the work that is being done by the pensions administrators. We're doing monitoring and auditing work of the processes and the procedures to make sure that not only are they compliant with the regulations, but we also look at, are they efficient and are they effective? So, we look at efficiencies so that you're getting, good value for money with the shared service agreement that you have with ourselves, that we're doing things in the right way and we're doing it effectively so that the member is getting the right outcome at the end of the day. And we also look at breach management and operational change within the business. And that is sort of a 360-degree feedback process that makes sure that when we find something, we feed it into the business, then the business makes the change and we go back and check that change has happened and that it actually is making the difference and adding the value that we want to do to the business. And finally, what we've started to address quite heavily in LPPA is we're getting the staff to embrace change, not to be fearful of it. Change is for a good reason. There are a lot of people within the administration business that have been there for many years. And when you talk to them about why they do things in a certain way, you quite often get the answer, because that's the way we've always done it. Well, just because that's the way you've always done it, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right way to continue to do it. There could be a better way to do it. There could be a more efficient way to do it. And things change. Processes change, systems change, regulations change. So there's always a better way to improve those processes and to make it easier for the people that are actually processing the work, but also make the end result better for the client and for the end member. So we're going through a culture change at the moment. We're addressing that culture that, just because you've always done it one way, that doesn't mean that it always has to be that way. Open up your mind a little bit and look outside the box. That's the type of thing that we're driving. I've talked about the documentation review that we've introduced. We've enhanced our due diligence quite significantly. So when I talk about due diligence, I'm talking about due diligence in the fact of making sure that we are not sharing any information with people that we shouldn't be sharing it with. So making sure that they do the proper checks of who is requesting information and that they are entitled to have that information. And also due diligence in respect to some of the really high risk processes, such as transfers out. And we've really enhanced the transfers out due diligence, because as you have probably seen, the pensions regulator is undergoing a campaign at the moment about pension scams. And that's nothing new. Pension scams have been around since 2010, if not earlier than that, when the original Scorpion campaign came out of the pensions regulator. And those scams, unfortunately, are not reducing. In fact, they are increasing, and the scammers are much more intelligent. They are much more likely to be perceived as genuine business, genuine businesses. Sometimes they clone, for a word that the FCA use, they clone a regulated company and basically pretend to be a regulated company, but actually under the surface, it's nothing like that at all. And people do get, they do get hoodwinked. And people, people can really believe that they are genuine, and they believe every word that they say. And so we've now enhanced our process. And I don't know whether you've heard about the pension scams pledge that the pensions regulator and the PASA are driving at the moment. We are signing up to that pledge. And we've also, as a company, joined a forum that is called the Pension Scams Industry Group. And that is a group whereby there's about 53 pension providers now that are a part of that group. And that is local government pensions, private pensions, SASs and SIPs, every type of pension that you can think of. It's a broad range of providers that have joined this group. But the beauty of it is that they all share their experiences and they all share their intelligence. So where a company that has found that they have been asked to transfer a pension away to one of these scam schemes, when they've actually identified that it is a scam, they share that intelligence with the group, so that we can then go back to our databases and we can see, have we been caught by this company? Have we actually transferred anything to this company? And also we add them to what we call our danger list. and any company named, any pension provider or company named on our danger list, as we call it, the pension administrators cannot transfer anything out to those companies or deal with those companies. Any of those cases that get requested to anything on the danger list comes to the compliance and risk team, and we will do a deep dive into those companies, and we will go back to the member and explain our concerns to them and explain why we don't think it's right for them to transfer to this particular receiving scheme. And in that way, we're all working together to try to stop this financial crime that's happening, and it's happening on a massive scale across the industry. And the more that we can do, and the more people that can come together to try to avoid people losing every penny that they've worked all their life to save up for their retirement, I think is a worthwhile thing to do. And as I said earlier, we're working towards the McLeod and the exit cap regulatory changes, and there'll be quite some more changes coming down the line over the coming years, I should imagine, with changes to the pensions bill, etc. So that's how we've developed, and that's how we're doing so much more now within the pensions administration world, actually looking at pension administration in detail, so that I can then stand up and give you assurance that your pension scheme is being administered and managed in an effective way. And what I started to do, if I can stop sharing that and share a different screen with you. When I can find it. You can never find what you want, can you? Apologies, I don't seem to be able to find the document. I was going to show you the monthly report that gets sent through to you each month that I created.
I think it's a part of the agenda. So if you have that, if you have that with you, if you have the agenda pack with you, you can.
I don't have the agenda pack, I'm sorry,
okay.
But everyone else can probably see what I'm trying to do.
So I think that's on page 21 onwards. So
thank you for that.
Yeah, so if the members and the officers can go to page 21, you can take us through that. But do you have a copy yourself, though you don't?
Yes, I do have a copy. It just doesn't come up
and share it.
Unfortunately.
That's fine.
So what I started to do, I think from about May, June time, was I started to create a monthly report for each client. And the purpose of this was really to give you an insight into your specific scheme and what we were seeing in the risk and compliance area for your scheme itself. And what I've been reporting each month basically is any compliance messages that I've been wanting to deliver to get across to yourselves, but it gives you a flavour of any complaints that have been made by your members, and it gives you details of any breaches that have happened on your scheme. So it's not just a very high level what's happening within the LPPA world, it is specific to the Newham scheme. And it's giving you sort of a snapshot of what your members are complaining about and what's happening within the administration world that's creating breaches. I've also added in there, I've talked about the transfers out due diligence that we've enhanced. And we are seeing now that the PPI claims have all disappeared and become time barred, the claims management companies have had to find their next way of making money. And their current way of dealing with that is to try to pursue claims for members who have historically transferred out of their local government or their public sector scheme and since then have found that unfortunately where they transferred their monies to was either a scam and they've lost it all, or the investment that they invested in as part of the new scheme was an investment that really wasn't suitable for them. It was a very high risk investment. And again, the investment has collapsed, or the investment has disappeared, because again, it's not necessarily the pension scheme that is the scam. It's sometimes the investment vehicle is the scam. So we have got people, unfortunately, that have fallen victim to this type of crime. And for the Newham account, you have there are two claims companies that have contacted us about 2 of your members, and I am currently responding to one of those claims management companies, and I will be doing the second one very shortly. But the way I've been doing this with all of our clients is when I create the response, which is a defence to the claims that they are making, I share that response with James or Caroline for Newham, for Havering, and I ask that they sign off the letter that they are happy for that response to be sent back to that claims management company in defence of the claim. So that we are, I'm doing the work to pull everything together into the letter to put all of the evidence in there, but working together to say that we are happy that that is the defence that we're going to go with against the claim that they're trying to make against us. And then at the back of the pack, there is a 6-month sort of trend analysis. So you can see in the back of that risk and complaints monthly report, a 6-month view of how complaints have gone up and down over the months, and the same with breaches.
That's page 28.
So I hope you find those reports useful, and I'm open to, input into that report. If there is anything that is not currently there that you would like to see, I'm more than happy to look at adding things into there for you. Or if there's something in there that you don't feel you're getting any benefit from, I'm happy to take it out. It is your report. I've done it for your benefit, and I'm more than happy to work with you so that it does give you that added assurance that we're trying to get across, that that things that are being done within the pensions admin area are being done properly. A few months ago, I did issue the annual assurance report, which I believe you've seen, and at that time it was very soon after I started with the business. So because I was new to the business itself and new to the administration area, I didn't feel that I was in a position to provide you with full assurance at that point in time. But when we redo that report in a year's time, I will be in a much better position, because we will have done our own internal in-house monitoring and audit reviews of the various areas of the business. And I will be much more confident then to come out and say to you, yes, I can give you absolute assurance that we're doing everything that we should be doing for you in line with the relevant regulations. And the plan, just for your awareness, is probably next year's report will come from me again, as the first one did. However, my plan is to move to a more AAF type of external assurance report. So the way I am building my compliance monitoring and audit team is that we will bring internal audit in-house, but I will still employ an external auditor, whoever that might be, to actually come in and do an annual assurance review. And as part of that assurance review, they will create the assurance report for yourselves, so that it's not just coming from me internally. You will have that external assurance as well. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks for that. That was very useful. I found that very useful. I'll open up the floor for questions. I have a couple of questions for you, but James, did you want to make any comments before I ask the board members for questions?
Sorry about it. Yeah, I think as far as Janet's presentation, I think it's covered a lot of the issues that were previously raised, because I think a lot of the concerns board had was around the GDPR that was sort of rated ineffective and had their right internal control report and the cybersecurity. So I believe Janet's covered sort of the areas of concern. I think the main thing was really providing some assurances that the data that's held by LPP is secure for our members.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Any questions for Janet before I ask them? Go on, John. John Saunders. John, you're on mute.
Yep. I was very grateful for the report. I feel a lot more confident having heard what you've said than I felt at the last meeting. I'm pretty sure that's what others have felt as well, actually. I'm very pleased about the points you made about the culture of the organisation and how that needs to change. I've got a couple of comments on. First of all, you mentioned at the end using the auditor to give an independent assessment as well. Presumably, I don't know, but presumably Deloitte's been there for some time, and they are therefore responsible for the culture which built up. I always feel auditors never do what they should do, but I'm not sure that's an uncommon view. But I did like to say that we shouldn't necessarily employ Deloitte unless we're fully confident that they can give us some more independent assistance in the future. The other thing I'd like to say is, has the board of the LPP changed as well as the administration? Because they have to take some responsibility for what's gone on. I'd like to think that they're the ones who are demanding the change and therefore that's okay, but I don't know whether that's so or not. Has the board changed at all?
It has changed, yes. So we now have, we still have LPPA group board, but LPPA has its own independent board now. So we have our own pension administration board who now oversee the administration part of the business. And the people on that board have changed. And you're right, they are now driving this change, and they are looking, to make that culture change within the business, and to get, those messages across that, it's not that we couldn't give you assurance previously, but I think it got sort of lost in all of the red tape with it being such a big group company, and I don't think the messages were delivered in quite as concise a manner as I like to do it. I like to be quite straightforward and I like to be transparent, and from what I can gather, I don't think they previously were very open at sharing Deloitte's findings and the outcomes of their audits, whereas I'm on the other side of the fence. If you've got nothing to hide, then why not share it with people? And the audits that you mentioned, the GDPR and the cyber audit, they were quite historic audits. They were done a couple of years ago, and the business has moved enormously since that was done. And I think if we redid those audits, it would be a completely different outcome. Because I think when they were first done, they had a few ineffective reports. And I think that's what I highlighted in the annual assurance report, because they were really the only type of system IT type reports that had actually been undertaken. So I reported those because, you know, I've got nothing to hide. You know, they might have been ineffective back in the day, but we have done an awful lot of work since those audits, and the business is a completely different place now than it previously was. I am also, as well as being head of risk and compliance, I am LPPA's data protection officer. So I take the data protection very, very seriously because it's my neck on the line. So, you know, so all of that, there's been an awful lot of change made.
Thank you very much. That's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Janet. John Hollins.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just wonder if Janet could clarify where responsibility for budget monitoring sits within LPPA, and would any risks related to the budget appear in the risk register that is monitored by her division, please?
The budget really sits within the investment and funding side of the business. Whilst LPPA, we have our own finance team, and they're responsible for you know, the operational budget to make the operational sound, and make sure that the pricing that we charge our clients is the right level. And again, that sits with our finance director to make sure that you know, the cost per member and all of that we charge is the right level that it should be. But that does feed into my area. I do have that on my risk register, and as part of my compliance monitoring and audit team, as I said earlier, we are looking at efficiencies. So we are trying to drive down the cost per member to make it more efficient and more effective for our members.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I saw that Donford had tried to raise his hand. Donford, do you have a question?
I did, Chair. Thank you. An observation and two requests. Thank you, Janet, for a very comprehensive and informative report. And Chair, a request possibly through you. Could a list of those companies that are carrying out these scams be shared with the board? And additionally, copies of anonymized letters that have been sent in defense of to those companies that Janet alluded to, could those be shared, please?
I'm happy to share anonymized response letters in defense of these claims. As part of the pension scams industry group, we don't have a documented list of all of the companies that are potentially involved in these scams, and that's purely to protect ourselves from any litigation, because we might suspect a company of perpetrating a scam. However, if it then transpired that we got our intelligence wrong or whatever, you know, we could be liable to libel or slander charges or something like that, which is what we want to try to avoid. And so really the discussions that we have around the table with all of the members of the industry group is not, we do minute the meetings, but we don't document all of the companies that are discussed.
How about even if we have, for example, the 10 most prolific?
What I am happy to share with you, Donford, is I would happily share with you those companies that have been charged, that have been publicly named as perpetrating these scams. I can do that quite happily, but with regards to some of the others, it's it is a very sensitive list of companies, and we have to be very, very careful with confidentiality and not disclose that.
Happy enough with that, Janet. That is definitely that will be of use to us. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Donford. Any other questions before I make my points? No. Janet, so thank you for that. That was very useful. I concur with John earlier that it gives us greater comfort and confidence in the way administration is run in LPPA. And I think we can say that things have definitely moved on since the audit reports have come up. I have a couple of questions there. So you said that the team structure under you has, sort of a forward-looking piece, as well as the BAU piece, which is, the way the business is working.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feed into the part where you discuss complaints, the team which discusses complaints? How does that feed into the former? So how do you know where, how do you actually identify the places or the units within your firm which you'll do a comprehensive review, where a compliance review would need, or process a compliance review would need?
Okay, so what we do is we have a way of monitoring all of the complaints that come into the business, and we do trend analyses. So we look at trends, whether it's the same department that keeps receiving complaints, whether it's the same process that's creating a complaint, whether it's a particular document or some correspondence that people are unhappy about. And from that trend analysis, we can see whether it's a certain, might be a certain process that we then go and have a look at and see, is it that process is maybe out of date, or is that process is it that the process is fine, but actually the caseworkers are not following that process? They're finding loopholes and shortcuts around it, and it's the fact that they're not following the process properly that is creating complaints. So it's all things like that we look at to identify whether we've got a procedure problem, whether we've got a training issue, what is actually the root cause of those complaints and what's driving them. And then we feed that back into the area of the business so that they can either improve their process, or they can do some training with their staff to try to prevent future complaints about the same thing reoccurring.
Great, thank you. So what you're saying is you identify the themes which keep recurring, and then you try to continually improve them.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, so it's like a two-pronged attack, really. The complaints handlers themselves, they do monthly feedback to each team within the organisation to give them a flavour of what complaints have arisen from the work that they are doing, so that the teams themselves have awareness of what is creating complaints. And then from the trend analyses, we then get the compliance team to go in and do a deep dive into the process or into the area of whatever is generating those complaints.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I had two more questions, slightly related to the compliance report. So the first one's easier, quicker. So can you include the definitions of each of the terms you use? For example, when you say something is a breach, on what basis does something become a breach? Okay. And if you can include things like the categorization of frequent complaints. So not just the dispute resolution part, but is there a broad theme which is recurring? So I think that'll be useful.
Yes, yeah, I can do that, no problem.
Yeah. And finally, the claims management companies pursuing transfer outs, as well as the risk of transfer outs in the future. So you said that you're building the case up for us and other schemes. Is there any view? What's your view on proactive communication to members and to employers? So not necessarily schemes, but our employers and their members. Proactive communication about this is what's happening, someone may contact you, or in the future, do not move out of the pension without speaking to a financial advisor or any such communication. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, we've put some information on the new member website about scams and the triggers and the flags to look out for, to try to make members more aware of how they can become a victim of this type of thing. So there is some new content on the new member website that was launched not too long ago. Our engagement team are engaging with employers again to raise awareness with them on this matter. So we are communicating with people about it. It's very difficult to other than to give like generic information. It's very difficult to, at the moment, the regulations give the members the right to transfer out. So the pension regulations, they have that right to transfer out. The only time we can insist that they have financial advice is if the value of the transfer fund is over £30,000. If it's over £30,000, we refuse to transfer it unless they have got financial advice that tells them that that's the right thing for them to do in their circumstances. But if it's less than £30,000, we don't legally have the right to stop them from transferring or to force them to take financial advice. But what I can advise you is that through the group that we've joined, the Pension Scams Industry Group, which is being really heavily pushed by the pensions regulator, we are lobbying to get the Pension Schemes Act changed to remove that right. So it will remove that clause within the legislation that says that the member has the right to transfer. We're trying to change that to say that if the pension scheme manager or the pension scheme trustee truly believes that it's the wrong thing to do, then they have the right to stop it. Whether that change will ever materialise is to be seen, but we are trying to get that changed. And we've got Margaret Snowden, who is the chair of the PASA, behind that fight as well. So we're hoping that if it's not changed completely to remove that they have that right per se, at least we might be able to soften it to say that the trustees or the scheme managers can step in if they truly believe that they are falling victim to some sort of fraud.
Right. I think that's very useful and it's very good that you're feeding into that consultation. I think I'll be quite interested to know if our scheme is giving any feedback or other schemes are doing it separately, or are you going to do it on behalf of all the schemes you run? And it'd also be useful to get employer feedback on if it's a general consultation. The people on this board and on other employer reps will have something to say, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're not at that stage at the moment, so it's not at consultation stage. We're just lobbying them to get them to go into that consultation stage, to try to get them to think about how they can change to try to stop more people from falling victim. So if it does go into consultation, then absolutely, yes, we will work with all of our partners that we work on behalf of, and we'll all work together to try to get that change through.
Great, thank you for that. So I think on that note, let's segue into the next item, and it'll be great to have you on that as well. So that's the risk and compliance report. Can I? James, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, Janet ran through that report just off the back of her presentation. We were just looking through. I think it might be a case just if any members have any observations of the report to sort of raise the questions rather than Janet going through the report.
Sure. Any specific questions on the report, or else we can move on? No. So yeah, that's it. Then we'll move to the next item. So thanks so much, Janet. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Next, we'll head to item 6, minutes of the last meeting. So can I ask the committee to confirm that the minutes of the meeting held on 10th November are a correct record of the meeting? Please raise your hand in agreement.
I wasn't at the meeting there, so I can't confirm.
Can I get a reminder of who was in the meeting?
Catherine Hanlon.
Catherine is not there. So John I said yes. Veronica, you were not in the meeting, were you? Okay. So I think that's fine. Let's minute that it was the right record. We should probably note that two members who attended that meeting were not in this. We should note that as well.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Let's move to the next item, item 7, action log, page 37. James and Pauline, do you want to give an update on that?
If I can just start. So
Sure.
just wanted to feedback. I just run through sort of the actions just against my name. So the first one is PB013. This is about the AVC, the Equitable Life Transferring to Utmost Life policy. And members just wanted to find out if there's any financial bonus attached to it. So in short, no. Basically what happened, it was a compulsory transfer from Equitable Life to Utmost. So there's no financial incentive behind it. And also just to reiterate, sort of an AVC policy doesn't impact the fund directly. Obviously it's privately invested, and then at the end of an AVC, that would be buying contributions. So that's sort of, I believe, would be resolved unless members have any follow-up questions.
John?
It was me who raised it. The reason I raised it because I have a personal pension with them, and I did gain some capital over the change, but I mean, that is a different situation than we've got here.
Yeah. So that was sort of for members. Obviously, that's how it's invested. For the fund, obviously, the outcome's still the same at the end of the life. It's to buy back pension service. So touching on PB023, this was just, I was just more seeking clarity because members asked for the membership data used by LPP be reviewed by the board. So I just wanted to touch on that because we receive quarterly LPP performance reports, which kind of informs us of missing data for emails, addresses, telephone numbers, where members don't have expressions completed, any outstanding leaving forms. But I kind of wanted to just ascertain if that was sufficient or whether there was something more specific that members were actually seeking.
I think the background for this is, as a board and as a scheme, we need to ensure that more younger and more people who are, let's say, financially disadvantaged, they need to be enrolled into the scheme. So I guess that was a driving force. I don't know, the discussion. So I think the point was we need to see more any data about membership, the demographic data, let's say, for example, and that will help the board monitor if there's any uptake in membership or if there's any targeted marketing we think is necessary.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'll keep the the action on, and potentially it may be worth then for the next board getting a sample of current active members list from LPP and seeing if we can provide sort of age groups of our current sort of in the scheme. We'd probably be, I did compile something a while back that had for our officers payroll, so that's the one we physically run, so we can actually see the number of members who aren't in the pension scheme, and that was kind of split by sort of the age group, obviously, and anonymised. But that may just provide sort of an indication, because obviously LPP will be able to tell you the demographic of its members, but not the demographic of people who have opted out. But I can make that as an action and probably bring back to board a sample of what we could produce, and then we can use that as a discussion point for a next.
Yeah, that'll be very useful, because I think it's not really an idea of where we are, but what we can do. So if we are deficient of any data types or any specific features we don't capture, then it'll inform us that we need to do that in the future. I'd also note that in the most recent pension committee report, there's very, very helpful demographics data of both the members as well as their dependents. That was really insightful, and anything you pull out now it'll help us compare with that, which is probably about a year old, so we can get an impact, get a view of what COVID has done into our employers and the members of the scheme.
Okay. Yep, that's certainly something I'll take away and bring back. Training. So action point PB015 was the training around the pension fund governance and compliance statement. So later in board, I'll be sort of running through just the training schedule of the kind of items that we want to sort of look to sort of get some training on. This one I've earmarked potentially getting the actuary to do a session. So it's really a time to just agree on the dates of our sort of regular training session. PB020, the cyber security and the GDPR membership data, that's what Janet was touching on sort of and producing a report, because that was off the back of the internal control report that she brought forward. The pensions PB024, the pension scheme administration training to be given to board members. This was the introductory training that Sam Kemp did, I believe, just before Christmas in December. But again, the training schedule is an item for later, where I'm just going to kind of go through how I look for it to be running. And PB026 is the training schedule that's was sent to the chair and is now going to be presented.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've given some feedback, but I'll formally give the feedback in the meeting as well.
Cool.
Rakesh, there was an item about impact of LIBOR cessation on the board. I think it said that the fund managers are incorporating
That's correct,
the impact. Yeah. Can I ask the committee, or maybe this is something the committee sees and then we see, or we see directly. Can I get a report of what they're actually doing? So, how are they doing it? How are they changing their hedging book? If they can give a report on that, it could be some bullets, or it could be a verbal update which they've mentioned to you, and you can tell us. It'll be helpful.
Yeah, sure, we can ask that.
Sorry, just on that note, that's because there haven't been any changes. So this is a change which will happen by the end of the year. So they wouldn't have made any changes as of yet, but they would have definitely planned.
Yes, so that's what it means, is to say that the investment advisors liaised with the fund manager, and they have said that that is part of the plan in terms of implementation.
Okay.
Yeah, but you want to see how they're changing that. For each fund manager.
Well,
because we got 17 fund managers.
So I don't think it's pertinent to all your fund managers. It depends on the asset class you're looking at. So whoever is you think is mitigating interest rate risks, or if you have foreign FX exposures and they're using US dollar LIBOR to hedge that, then this is not just a sterling issue. This is a US dollar issue as well. So I'm not that close to the hedging book of the asset classes, so I'll leave that to you.
Okay, fine. No worries.
It could be one or five, or it could maybe a question to all of them, and they said we are not affected, and therefore at least we can be we can draw some comfort there.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And Pauline, I saw that you sent the committee annual report yesterday, so that's fine.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on. The next item is item 8, the pension administration report. This is on page 41.
Chair, if I may, a question from John Saunders.
Oh, thank you. John, sorry, I couldn't see you in the background.
That's okay. I'm walking across the bridge, you see. It's not a question. I just wonder if at some stage we can include how we can deal with ESG, climate change, sustainable investment. I think it would be worthwhile doing that because there's more than one view on what we can do and what we can't do, and I think that would be useful to know.
Rakesh, I think it'll be helpful if you can give us an update. I remember you gave an update in October meeting to the committee. Was it the October meeting and November meeting?
Well, I'm not sure if we've actually covered it off, but we have drafted. We have a new ESG framework that we agreed back in end of February last year. Yeah, so I think we're one of the first LGPS funds in the country to develop our own ESG policy. Yeah, so that is a major thing that we've done. So all our investments will be within that framework. They have to be guided by the framework that we developed. So whether it's moving into the London Civ or going into new asset classes or any asset classes we're in, we'll always be driving that ESG agenda in terms of many aspects. Obviously, within Newham, there's also the climate emergency that has been declared we're one of the, so I think it's about 17 authorities in London that have declared a climate emergency. So as part of the council's overview is to see how each service can contribute in terms of reducing carbon footprint, carbon exposure, which is something that we're very well aligned to anyway, but it's something that obviously will guide us in terms of all the future planning that we have, everything that we're doing within the fund.
Is that report available?
Yes, it's. I believe it's a public item that was. I can arrange for that to be circulated to everyone if that's helpful.
That'd be good if it's not too long.
Yeah.
And I think, John, it's also mentioned in the committee report, so I think you can take a look at that. And I think if it's useful, James, we should probably arrange a training session about that later, or at a minimum we could get Rakesh probably give us a refresher, so to speak, like you did for the committee most recently. I saw the recording of that. That was very useful.
All right, no worries.
Thank you. Thanks, John. So now we'll move on to the pension administration report. It's item 8 on the agenda, page 41, everyone. James.
Thanks, Chair. So I will just run through the report in its entirety, but at the end of it, please feel free to give me any questions or comments that you see fit. So section number 2, pensions administration services, the contract price for 21-22. So LPP as we know from what was presented at last board and subsequently the prior committee, obviously we were presented with a large increase from our base budget position. And so what took place is some negotiations with LPP about going forward, about how their pricing structure would work. And what they've done is provided us with their budget for 21-22, which is an increase, but an expected increase because it should be trail similar to the forecasted outturn for this year. So they presented us with a budget for next year of 603k. So that was part of the report last presented previously, the options paper. It did entail sort of how, even though a sizable increase from the current year, it's still a very competitive price for a pension administration service. But the impact it means for 2021 is where we agreed at the start of the year a budget of 296,000. So that was a CPI increase from the previous year. We had to have an arrangement where we would pay half the cost above budget this year. So as that's projected to be around 590k, that would mean it'd be a one-off payment to the fund of 147k. We've agreed this would be settled in April, so we'd accrue accordingly for it. But again, that was covered in the previous report that it was to be expected. Moving on to some good news. Obviously, unfortunately, Ian Weaver's left at the end of October, but we have been successful in finding a replacement for Ian on a permanent basis. So at the time of writing this report, we offered the job, but now I can confirm that a start date of the 1st of March will be coming. It's Jackie Andreas. She is coming from Greenwich. She's coming with a wealth of experience, and we're really looking forward to working with her. Obviously, in the interim, that means you've still got me just taking the lead for Newham's pension administration, but I'm supported by Haverin's contract manager and Sam Kemp within the payroll pension administrator for LGPS as well. But obviously, going forward, I'm hoping there's going to be a lot of cross working between the two contract managers, and we hopefully will get some new ideas and into the pension board and pension administration as well. As a standing item, I thought to include the COVID-19 update. So to confirm, LPP is still working from home. We're still prioritising bereavement cases and processing retirements. And what I've included in an Appendix A is a questionnaire that I'm looking to go back out to employers with, and to really gauge the impact of furlough. I know Sam touched in the training session, but just to reiterate, obviously, if someone's on furlough, if they're getting paid 100% of their salary, it's no issue at all. If they're dropping down to 80%, then they're reducing the amount of contributions. So there's a slight reduction in their service. So they'd have to either potentially accept the reduction in their contributions or agree to additional pension contributions. Obviously, for officers, this hasn't been taken up. For employers, at the first questionnaire, no one was reducing the pay of any of their staff. But I feel with a second or a third lockdown, it was a good time to recirculate a survey just to try and make sure that we're on top of it, because the main thing that we want to do is make sure that no member isn't aware of their options if they are put on furlough. I have requested LPP as well. They'll be producing further death reports so we can actually see the not only death in services and death of our members and our members in receipt of a pension, just so we can compare for previous years to see the impact COVID has actually had on our numbers. And as well, it's just to reiterate the impact that potentially that could have to employers if a number of companies off the back of COVID cease trading. That can be an impact for the cash flow to the fund. But again, we haven't had any issues with contributions not being received, so we don't see that as an issue to the fund as yet. Janet mentioned it, McLeod. It is the subject that is constantly in the background that is constantly ticking away, but got superseded by the cost cap of importance because the exit cap just came in and trumped it. But this is still ticking away in the background. At the moment, we're just waiting on the findings of the recent consultation. LPP, as Janet said, responded to the consultation. We obviously submitted our response off the back of it. We're waiting for that to come through before we have any further sort of update. At the moment, it's still in the same position. We know it's coming. It's just when and how it is truly going to affect us. Item number 7 is the exit cap. So before, when I presented, we were still in the stage of it's going to be agreed, but we just didn't know when it was, and if it was going to be the end of October or mid November or the start of November. So it has come into effect. So to reiterate, we're in a position of twofold. We've got the MHCLG with the cap guidance of the 95k, which is quite clear cut. You're either over it or you're under it, depending on your pension benefits, the exit payment. If you fall beneath it, there's no change. You still get your unreduced pension, and you don't take any defers or anything else. If you fall over the 95k cap, then the 3 options apply to you: is taking the reduced pension, accepting a reduced termination payment, or deferring your receipt of pension. Obviously, that's the MHCLG's exit cap, but as we know, the local government pension scheme regs require anyone who's made redundant to still receive an unreduced pension in the event of a redundancy. So that gives the awkward position of 2 pieces of the legislation saying the complete opposite thing. So we've taken various legal steers and liaising with LPP and the officers, LG officers group, and the scheme advisory board guide. It's not advice; it's their view. Is around if you're going to break one of the rules, it's better to break the lesser, which is not going to have the impact to us. So that's why we're going down the route that impacts employees to the sake of we are issuing unreduced pension or offering the opportunity to defer, but that just puts us into the position that an employee can challenge, and so there's various cases that are sort of being escalated through various funds. We haven't had a direct one yet, but LPP have had some, so we're kind of waiting to see how that falls out when it does go up to the Ombudsman in the end. So very messy, and we're still waiting for the LG scheme to update their regulations. The last we were hoping that was going to be April. I hear a rumour that may be as late as June, but again, I'll keep you updated when that changes. Item 8 is linked to the 95k cap, but this is the move to the GAD factors. So what basically the strain cost is the element that seems to be tipping a lot of people in past the 95k cap. So it's not necessarily their redundancy and the pension that they would be receiving. It's the actual strain cost that is actually tipping an individual into the exit cap. So current factors are specific to showing the true impact from an actuarial standpoint. So obviously, if you're a man or woman, there potentially be different factors applied to you. Under GAD, everything's unisex. It's all done based on standard factors. So where in the past strain costs never really impacted anyone other than the transfer between the employer and the pension fund, because it can technically impact an individual, we've decided to move forward and introduce GAD factors earlier. So that obviously makes it more transparent and fair. But obviously it's just a change that I felt we needed just to highlight as well. So yeah, that's the pension admin update. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone's got any.
Thanks, James. I have a couple before I get it into asking the board members. So the key question is the risk you just noted that the administering authority has to decide which set of regulations to break during the period when the exit regs oppose the LGPS regs. Is that highlighted in the risk register? Because I think that's a pretty big risk. And I think, I don't know how it would look for a scheme to be knowingly breaking a regulation.
It's a tricky one, because you break LG regs or you break sort of the overarching exit cap regulations. So either way you break a regulation, it's just deemed to be less risky to break the LG regs. So how it really is going to transpire is that someone who is impacted by it, so they've got their reduced pension or sort of now receiving a reduced pension when they would otherwise have received a full pension under previous regulations, they obviously put their complaint in and it goes as far as up as the ombudsman. The likelihood is the ombudsman will go in favour of the employee, so then the fund will then have to reinstate a full pension for that individual. But if we go on the basis of we'll pay that full pension and then it transpires that we shouldn't have done, then you've got to then catch the overpayment back off of the individual. So it's just a horrible position to be in, because whatever way we go, we're wrong, but it's which way is less wrong legally, and that was where it's just deemed the exit cat regs fall higher than the LG regs in sort of the level of, I suppose, priority, and so that's where we've gone by, and that seems to be the 99% of the case. That seems to be the same view everyone is taking. So we're not an outlier in our decision to do so.
So have we taken external legal advice on this, or is it our internal legal?
So the Scheme Advisory Board put out sort of advice of what they how they would steer. So obviously they got their legal advice. We've got our internal legal view. LPP gained their legal view. So of a collection, we've been part of the LG Work Officer Group as well. So that received their guidance from the Scheme Advisory Board. So we're really taking kind of a steer from the Scheme Advisory Board, to be honest.
And are there any projections of what could be the material impact on the fund?
As far as the actual impact of the fund, technically, it's obviously we're paying out less because there's less pension we're paying out to the individuals, and there's the potential. The one of the impacts of it is it's not going to be as appealing for people over the age of 55 to take redundancy. So you may have people occupying posts for longer, which may have been deleted in a restructure before, potentially. So there isn't any figures I've been provided with. I can liaise with the actuary to see if there has been anything that they could put a
James,
number on.
I didn't mean the impact of the exit cap. I meant about the litigation risk which is out there, or let's say the regulator decides to fine us. Let's say the regulator decides to fine all the schemes, then that will be highly material. Any fine would be more material than any payouts to individuals.
Potentially. I think the risk is low. We can certainly add it to the risk register, and I can raise it up in officer group to see if anyone else has a similar viewpoint. But yeah, I think for us, we can add that to our risk register. But like I said, either option we would have applied, we would have had to have taken the same view that we were going to be wrong. It's just in which circumstance we were going to be wrong. So I'm happy for it just to be something that we monitor. And as I said, I will be providing updates as cases escalate to see, and then we kind of know where we actually stand, because obviously people have gone through and been, some quotes are being impacted by the 95k cap already. So yeah, I will bring back updates, and I will also raise that specific point with our actuary.
Yeah, thanks, James. I think that'd be prudent. I have one more question before I ask the other board members. the COVID-19 update 5.2, you say that pension administration services continue to prioritize the payment of monthly pensions and processing of retirement and bereavement cases.
Yep.
Do we have any MI supporting this, that we are indeed doing that?
I don't have any of that, although the LPP quarterly performance, or the last one where they're actually showing their calls history and their data, didn't show any signs of sort of delays in actually getting these payments processed. But I can ask for some specific stuff to take back to board next month.
Yeah, that'll be useful. Thank you. Any other question for James? No. Okay, so thanks, James. So I propose we note the update.
Could I just add one thing? Was there any comments in relation to the Appendix A, or are we happy for it to go in its current form?
It's page 49. By when do we have to provide feedback?
It was a case if anyone had any feedback now. Otherwise, I'm happy to for any feedback to come in the next week. That's fine. I just wanted to give board the opportunity just to input on it before it's actually circulated. So I'm happy to circulate outside for comments, or just wait for comments outside of the board.
You've used this before, though, haven't you? So
similar, yeah. There's a little bit of a tweak towards a couple of the questions, but on the whole, it's pretty much the same. But it's just a case of whether there was anything more we kind of wanted to get out of our employers. Like I said, there's the main things we really want to tackle is whether they're furloughing people, are they aware they're furlough, you know, the impact of it, and potentially what they feel their future position may look like. Because it's just a two parts. There's one to look at the the members' perspective, and then one it's as an employer sort of financial sustainability aspect.
James, do we know if any of the employers are in financial distress?
No.
So
as far as we're aware, everyone is
of them
submitting
are.
their contributions. If they weren't submitting their contributions, that would probably be the first sign that they're in trouble. The thing to also remember is a lot of our employers provide services to our schools. So on the whole, a lot of them are kind of their pre-agreed contracts. But yeah, we haven't received anything in relation to dropping contributions or anything like that. So we're relatively happy at this stage, although that's why we kind of want to go out again to see if the third lockdown has hit harder.
Yeah, that was my only question. So I don't have any further feedback. So I'd request the board members to either give feedback now or reach out to James separately within this week. Thank you. The next item is the pension board plan and the annual report. I think it's a verbal item. James, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I just wanted to note, one, I'll be sending around just both reports because I've added glossaries to them. Apologies, it wasn't added to the agenda pack. But I also wanted to touch on, because I know one of the comments on the plan was around timescales, what we're kind of what specifically are we looking to sort of achieve. So obviously we've got our objectives, but it's kind of breaking it down on a further level. So what I was going to suggest is I'm also going to send through to board outside of the meeting is the Code of Practice 14 for governing and administrating a public service pension scheme. Because what I'm planning to do once Jackie starts is to actually get a list off the back of that for all the various regulations that a pension scheme sort of needs to be adhering to from the pension regulator, and seeing how Newham are stacking up. And it would be kind of a standing item to really say each section by section, because obviously when you look at it, it does look a very droll and long amount of pieces of regulation in there, but we'll break it down into a part that we could dissect, just so over time it kind of gives the board kind of a bit of an idea of how we're trying to tick off any kind of gaps that we may have. But that it felt kind of a good exercise to bring in Jackie when she starts. So I just kind of wanted just to touch on it. But it was my first part was about the glossary, and the second part is just to pre-warn that I'd be sending around about the code of practice from the regulator, and we'll follow it up with hopefully a standing item if everyone agrees.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to have that as a standing item. That's in line with, putting dates on milestones for whatever we raise in the plan. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of commonality between the reg requirements and what we've identified.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be useful exercise, and also useful to get Jackie involved at the start. Bringing her experience from outside will be very useful. Thank you. Next item is the training schedule. James.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So what I've just outlined, so the first one is just an overview. So I kind of wanted to touch on the idea behind it. So basically, we need to be ensuring that we're monitoring the training that we're kind of doing as a board, because that really should be feeding into the annual statement, the annual report at the end of the year. So like with committee, they record their training, board should be doing a similar case. So what I've kind of initially done is just outline the sessions that we're looking to kind of plan in the future. So one of the items was the annual benefit statement. So that will be Sam Kemp again.
Chair, apologies to interrupt. We've lost our clock temporarily. Could I ask for just a brief pause?
Oh, yes, certainly.
While we wait
Sure.
for her to return. I do apologise.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you for bringing it up. We'll wait for a sec.
Sorry to keep you, Chair. Just waiting for her to rejoin us.
That's absolutely fine. Have you sent in a note, Antonella?
Yes, I've received a note from Pauline to say that she had a few IT problems and she's been removed from the meeting. So she's just trying to rejoin now.
That's absolutely fine. I mean, these are things we have to get used to.
Thank you, Chair.
There may be one more year where we do this, so let's we get used to it. Such a thing will never happen in a real meeting room, but
These are new and unusual times.
yeah, you sound like our Prime Minister.
Chair, if the committee wanted to go on to mute for a while, and that way, if there's anything that you wanted to turn your hand to, I'll let you know once the clerk has returned.
Yeah, that's fine. I'd like to stay unmuted, but if you can mute the others, so
yes,
the
sure,
others
that's
want to
fine,
mute.
Chair. Just a suggestion, if everybody wanted to mute themselves in case there was something that they wanted to do. With your permission, I might even pause the recording. Would that be acceptable?
How easy or difficult is it for you to resume recording?
It should be quite easy. We'll need to do that for when we go into exempt session. So it's just a pause and then a return. So
okay, that's fine. I think it's a good idea. We can.
You're live again.
Thanks, Antonella. Thanks, Pauline, for joining us. So, James, where we left off was you're going to take us through the training schedule.
Thanks, Chair. So yeah, I've just touched on it. So basically, the training schedule is going to be a standing item for board each session.
Yep.
So what I just wanted to kind of just touch on is just run through the sessions that we're going to look to be running. One of the notes is just we do need to commit on some dates for our bi-monthly sessions. But we've got the review and the annual review and understand the annual benefit statement. So that's going to be Sam Kemp again as an internal training. But tied on to that, because it shouldn't be too long of a session, one of the items it was kind of understanding the role of the board, and that may be one potentially we could tag on to it, is the pension regulators sort of regulations on top of that as well. But tied together, I've spoke to LPPA and they're happy to do two sessions. One is just to give a brief overview of upcoming legislation, so they touch on the McLeod and the cost cap, etc., and other legislation that is coming up. And John Kroos will talk more about performance and processes, because that was another one that the board were quite interested, is just to understand our processes and timescales for turnarounds and expectations. So that was kind of set. In the interests of just trying to get some overall general knowledge to the board of the wider pension, I sent round the Sit for LGPS Actuarial Summit. So I've only had one response back from that. So I believe there is still places. So if you do want to attend that, that's February the 8th, I believe. So that's just what I kind of wanted just to reiterate as well. And the Understanding Pension Fund Governance and Compliance Statement for Barnet 1 is again another item. What I'm planning to do as well is the Appendix A is the document that I will be circulating. So it's basically just monitoring attendance for each of the schemes. So obviously, with the benefits of remote working, remote living, you can also remote train. So I obviously record the people who are coming through live and recorded and outstanding. So hopefully, where we've got internal LPPA doing it, we'll be able to have recordings on file, so everyone can catch up on them if they're not able to meet on the actual day. So yeah, that's just where I kind of wanted to touch on the training. And as you can see, I've kind of just put a couple of notes on for other potentials. And if there's anything else the board is looking, I can look to getting training in place, providing obviously we agree the dates that we're looking to do.
Sure. So thanks for this, James. This is really, really useful. And I think I'd encourage all board members to utilize the training facilities that have been provided to us, both internally and externally, because it's one of our key responsibilities as a board to be right on top of things in terms of our responsibilities and the knowledge and experience. So I think we need to build that. And I'd strongly encourage all of you to make use of these facilities and try to attend them live, or if not, if wherever possible, see the recordings. Because what I've asked for is the Appendix A that you see, the training plan, that is something we'll be tracking. And in the next report, we'll be issuing that as well. So it's a public document, so it'll be good to make sure that, if the regulator asks us what the board is doing, then we can show that our board members are engaged fully and they're getting trained, they're upskilling when necessary. So I strongly recommend we all use that. Also, I think to add to James's point, please flag any specific requirements. There may be some things which we don't know we need. So if you know that from experience or from your discussions outside, please flag that to us so we can add that to the schedule. And James, one suggestion I have is, when we have when you have Jackie joining us, So I think using her experience in terms of her involvement with other boards, if there's any training gaps, flagging that would be useful. Thank you. John, is saying something, John? Saunders? John, you're on mute.
Excuse me, is it? Okay. I missed the last training session, and I went through the recording, and it was really useful actually to have the recording, because it was even more useful than being there in some cases, because you could go back and check things. So I wonder if we could have somewhere where we could access all of these training sessions readily, easily. You said you're recording them all, so maybe there's a way we could just clock in and look at the bits we want to look at in the future.
Yeah, we'll certainly look into how we can get them circulated so they're readily available. I'll obviously speak with Democratic Services as well, who likely be recording them. But yeah, however we try it, we'll make sure we get it through. At the bare minimum, we'll always email them out after a session if we can.
Thanks, John. John Hollins.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it was a couple of months ago, we had an online training system circulated to us all to complete. I was just wondering whether that should be part of this actual training plan and its monitoring, or whether that's something separate from this plan.
I certainly take your point, John. Yes, the toolkit was part of sort of when you did the questionnaire to identify your skills, and that was one to put on there. But yes, I will include that on the Appendix A, and just so we can monitor the responses back on that. So yeah, it's another thing that we would like to show. But yeah, admittedly, the Appendix A at the moment is just showing training sessions rather than the sort of the online tool. So yeah, thank you for raising it. I'll make sure that's put back on the appendix.
Sorry, actually, James, I think John might be referring to a link I circulated just before Christmas. And it was from one of the pension, can't remember the name of the link, but I know John, it's a little certificate you complete. Caroline gave us a link that we circulated.
Isn't that on the covering note that you complete the skills audit on, that toolkit? But either way, I'll feedback to Caroline and make sure that the toolkit's on there, because I think I'm referring to the same one, but I might be just getting my wires crossed of where it's actually shown. But yeah, definitely the toolkit will be on there.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. I can't remember what it was, or I can't access it either yet at the moment.
Okay.
John Saunders.
I think part of that was the information on the pension regulator and the courses, or whatever you call them, they run. I went on to some of those. They take an enormous amount of time, anything up to an hour and a half. And I think you get some sort of certificate or something at the end. What I would like to do is to go into them and quickly scan them rather than go through the whole process. Is that going to be to our disadvantage? What I don't want to see is me going online and being told I failed to answer all the questions or something like that, and that being recorded somewhere. You know how this works? I mean, I don't really want to spend days going through all of them, but having a snapshot at some of them would be very useful.
I think that specific one, you can go back onto it, but I'll tell you what, John, if you allow, I'll come back to address that one outside of the board, because I just want to have just a look into it. But because where it's not run by us, I don't think we can sort of bite size it down. It's the standard one. But I will see if there's anything we can actually do. Maybe we potentially can export it so you can more review. Sort of
they are very good if I can add that comment. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
James, I have a suggestion on the Appendix A. I think I emailed this to you, but I'll note it here anyway. So if we can have a grouping for the training. So for example, I want to say investment risk administration of that sort. So that way we can see where the focus has been in terms of training, and if any member has to focus on any specific group, then that will help us track that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so any other questions for James? No? Okay, thank you. Thanks, James. Now we give James a break, and then we go to Rakesh. Rakesh, do you have a verbal update about the funds?
Yes, I have. Okay, just bear with me a second. Okay, so this is in relation to the investment strategy paper that we discussed at the last pensions committee on the 15th of December. So the key over here was looking through current investments, part of our current investment strategy, and also looking at our funds performance. So if you at the last Q2, which would have been actually now ending September, 30th September, the funding level had gone up to 1.5 billion, and it was up from 1.4 in Q2. So the strong recovery is in contrast to obviously what happened during COVID, where the fund had slid down to 1.37 billion because of the pandemic declaration. So obviously has an impact on the market. So surely but slowly, you know, the markets have recovered, and the fund has reacted quite positively on the back of that. So that's been quite a positive step in terms of the fund value. Interesting news, we, as you may be aware, that we had been shortlisted for 2 awards at the LAP Investment Awards for 2020. We were shortlisted for good governance and also for best approach to sustainable investments. The panel chose LGPS experts judging these awards. So we actually won the Good Governance Award for 2020, which was quite a feat because we were actually up against some very large pension funds, West Midland Pension Fund and Essex County, which have huge funds and have a huge amount of resources in terms of this. So for the fact that we actually won that, it was actually a very good response in terms of how the committee has been able to make decisions and provide good governance all the way through in terms of that over the last year. In relation to the best approach to sustainable investing, unfortunately, we lost that to the Environment Agency, which is not a bad thing, I suppose, because obviously they are probably the leaders within the LGPS on that particular area. So I suppose we were quite happy to lose to somebody who's obviously got many accolades in the Environment Agency in terms of sustainable investing. Next point was we had a discussion regarding, you may recall that our equity managers, active public equity managers, we were taking a view to take some risk off the table with them, purely because the fund had reached a certain level in terms of its funding value, and we weren't looking more at the growth factor, we were looking more towards diversification, because we have a number of alternative assets that we want to fund. So a decision was taken actually last July to reduce the active holding that we have, to reduce it by half. So at this moment in time, as we're talking, we are on a phased approach of moving the assets across from that particular asset class, and we'll be holding them in our passive index-controlled, index-linked rather, manager. So that's something that's currently ongoing. Also, as you're probably aware, we have quarterly strategy or asset panels that we do on a quarterly basis. So a lot of the discussion in relation to what happens at the actual committee, where we have the deliberation at the actual asset panel meetings. So another area that we're looking at is our obligations towards pooling our assets. You may be aware that we've been working with the London Civ over the last few years in terms of opening up dialogue, discussing our investments strategy with them, and seeing how they can support us and how they can see our direction moving forward in terms of how we can pool. So over the last year, there's actually been quite a turn in terms of the governance and in terms of the specialized investment team that they now have there. And as a result, we had a meeting with them last September. That was with the new chief investment officer. They've also now got a lead for the ESG within there, which they didn't have previously. Again, these are very positive developments within the London Civ. And on the back of that, it's obviously given members a lot more confidence. The chair and officers have been having a number of meetings with them. There are regularly business updates that we attend as officers, and also the chair attends. So the confidence in terms of how their governance is moving forward and how their investment strategies are looking now is giving the committee a lot more confidence, and has given them a lot more confidence in terms of moving forward with our agenda. So the key thing in terms of decisions that we took, the key decision we were looking at was in terms of our fixed income mandate. So we have approximately 120 million with a fixed income manager, which is Aberdeen Standard Investments. They unfortunately sit outside the asset pool, and they are not on the pool. So we have to take a decision in terms of moving from the incumbent fixed income mandate across to or looking at the options that are available on the London Civ. So the global bond fund within this pool is managed by a company called PIMCO, a very large company, probably one of the top 10 fund managers in the world, a very big company. The thing that obviously attracted us to that was the fact that they also have a very good ESG firmly embedded within their investment process. And this was something key for members, because we, as I discussed earlier, we have an ESG framework that we've developed, a policy, which we agreed at the committee back in just before COVID. And that was something that we've been working towards. Although we have social responsible investment policy within our annual report, this was something a lot more stronger in terms of specifics, in terms of metrics, in terms of how you measure the environment, the social and the governance aspects of companies. So those are very inherent in what members wanted. We've had numerous trainings on this. Our scheme investment advisor is actually specialized on ESG as one of their main skill sets. And they have actually they also won an award last year in terms of the contribution towards ESG within the public sector. So we're quite happy that they shaped that and framed that particular framework and policy. So now we were in a position where the fund that the London Civ have is something that we are quite confident with. So the decision was taken at the last committee to now make a move towards pooling on the basis that this fund is ESG compliant. There's less exposure that we have than we have with our current manager. And the fact that the current manager has been doing remarkably well over the years. I think it's a legacy fund that's been there for a number of years, certainly before I started here anyway. So on the back of that, unfortunately, because they're not able to move into the Civ, this was seen as the best option for us, and also in terms of our obligation to start moving towards the pooling agenda, which the government has put a directive to all LGPS funds to do. So that's a decision that was taken at December. We're now in the process of exploring timings. Obviously, within that, we have to look at a number of aspects in terms of events. So obviously seeing how things pan out at this moment in time with COVID, and looking at how the vaccinations, the timing aspects will need to be taken into consideration. Since we've also we're in the process of moving half of our active manager equity out at the same time. So it's just a matter of timing and exploration, and also looking at the monies that are coming through, which will be diversified through into other asset classes as well. That is the update in relation to what we discussed. If you have any questions.
Thanks, Rakesh. Any questions for Rakesh? So, Rakesh, I have a couple.
Yeah.
So you said that we are gradually reducing our active holding in equity, moving into passive index-linked
Yes.
funds, I guess. So is there a fee impact as well? Are we going to see lesser fees being paid out?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Because we're so the current holding that we have with passive manager, they don't actually sit within the London CIV because it's the way the structure is the ACS structure. So they sit on a platform outside, but we have benefit of the pooling aspect in terms of fund reduction. So we have had substantial savings anyway. But the fact that now we're going to be moving more of our funds out from our active manager, that will obviously have a huge impact in terms of the fees that we're being charged. And what we're also exploring at this moment in time is also looking at a greener version fund within the passives. So a greener version means that it'll have less exposure to carbon, oil and gas, etc. So that's again a fundamental part of terms of what we're doing. And we've had a lot of, even when we were actually shaping our ESG policy, we'd invited the fossil-free Newham to the committee at that time to have that dialogue with them. And it's really about engagement and ensuring that, you know, the steps that we're taking are going to be long-term. And is there going to be mileage in having stocks where obviously if the returns are not available going forward, is it really viable to continue down that road as well? And I think those are all part and parcel in terms of how we're looking to move forward in terms of the climate emergency and the ESG.
Okay, thanks. That's useful. And are we also exploring additional alternative investments like real estate or from the cash we'll free up?
So the cash will free up. We obviously we took a number of decisions over the year before last. So we've got real assets class, and we've also got private debt as an asset class, and we've got a number of managers within those. So because we're reshaping our strategic asset allocation, we'll have sufficient headroom where we can place more investments into those asset classes as a result of how we're aligning the strategic asset allocation. So that's what we're doing. Okay. And also in the same vein, obviously there's some legacy funds that have been there for numerous years, and those we'll be looking to come out of as well, pull away from, and also diversify those monies into those holdings. So we're more diversified.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finally, you said that the fund back in March was 1.3 billion, and it came back up in September.
Yeah.
Because the equity markets rallied up. Was there any realignment or rebalancing done to the fund as a result of the dip in February, or was there a view that we just ride the time and then we trust the markets to come up?
Well, it's a bit of both. I mean, we actually in comparison to other funds, our dip was substantially less, and that's because we also have a risk overlay on our exposure in our equities. So we have some other products. We have USTs, for example, we'll have some other sophisticated instruments there to help balance the exposure that we have. And the fact that we're now moving away more from our equities, we'll be looking at the next asset panel. We'll be reviewing again, looking at those other solutions that can obviously mitigate any kind of risk exposure that we may have on the market.
So you're saying the risk overlay was to other assets or asset classes which have
risk overlay is primarily
correlated with the equities?
It's primarily for the equities, the risk overlay, but also we have a macroeconomic advisor that we use. So we obviously use that as part of any events that's happening globally will have an impact. So that is part of our risk management. So when we liaise with them, we take them, they'll have a meeting with us, and they will discuss in terms of what's happening in the events and how that may have an impact on your portfolio. And they'll give suggestions, and we'll liaise them with our investment advisor in terms of best products or best solutions in the short to medium term, in terms of how we can best utilize and mitigate risk exposure.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rakesh.
Okay.
John.
If we move over significantly to passive funds, we have less opportunities to engage, and if we feel it's part of our duty to encourage companies and investors to move towards a sustainable economy, a zero level economy, how much are we missing out on that opportunity? Or is there some way you can do this jointly with others in these passive funds?
Well, that's something that we're quite keen on. So as you're quite familiar with the LAP, who obviously are the local pensions organisation, who lobby and will always take that forward. So the fact that we're now looking to pool with the London Civ, which is pooling for all 32 boroughs, it gives us a greater voice, and we would obviously be pushing that agenda to the asset pool to take that up. And obviously, as they're obviously managing that many more funds, it gives you a lot more leverage in terms of your voice being heard by those particular organisations where we need to have that lobbying, or if we don't have that engagement on terms of changes to policy. There's two things you can do. Either you can exclude yourself, or if you want to change it, you have to be part of the solution to bring that change forward. Yeah.
You mentioned the London Civ. I'm sorry, but what is that? I obviously should know, but I don't.
Oh, London Civ is the collective investment vehicle. So part of the government regulation was 2015 was that the 89 funds within the LGPS funds within the UK were to form into 8 pools. So the pool that we naturally fall into geographically is the London pool, which is probably the biggest pool because it has 32 authorities. So that's part of the pooling environment. So you have pools like that geographically all over the UK. I think it's 8 pools in total. So you've got a pool in Wales, you've got a pool in the north, you've got a pool border to coast, etc. So in a similar way, we have that. So that is initially there's been a lot of change at the top of the top management. There's been a lot of changes over the few years, which is one of the reasons why we were quite reluctant in terms of our pursuance in terms of moving into the London Civ. But subsequently, over the last year or so, there's been a fabulous change in terms of the dynamics and the caliber of people who've been brought onto the London Civ. And that's one of the reasons why we're looking to move forward with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Rakesh, for the update. It's very useful. Next, let's move to item 12. So this is for this is a new item. I think is a standing agenda item for any urgent business, which I have to consider before the next meeting. So nothing was flagged to me, but this will be the item henceforth where we'll discuss any such matters. So item 13. So this is for exclusion of press and public. So now I will pass a resolution so we can discuss the exempt minutes from last time in a private session. So that will not be made public on YouTube. So I propose we move into that exempt session. Can I get the members to second me, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I then say that the committee resolves that we move into the exempt session and to consider the exempt agenda items. So I think that brings the end of the public part of the meeting.
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair, I'll pause the live stream now so that you can continue in private session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.